Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Josh.
I'm pumped to have you on the program, man. We've got some mutual friends in Jack and Nikki Moore, and I was recently at your spot up in Cleveland on one of the colder days, which I think was a really good way to enjoy it. And even before I visited, I had no idea that you were a non-drinker within the industry. So when Jack told me that, it sparked interest in getting the two of us together. If anything, just to thank you for how great that meal was. Well worth the
Well,
drive.
thank
I think
you,
I
man.
referenced in
I'm
text.
blushing.
You were the only reason I drove to Cleveland that day, so it really was astounding. I think I told you in a text that I would have done it twice.
Yeah, you did, and thank you very much. So, thank you.
For those that are listening and maybe not lucky enough to live close to the Midwest, can you talk a little bit about what Larder is?
Yeah, Larder is. We always kind of refer to it as the little delicatessen that could. We're a 26 seat Jewish Eastern European delicatessen. We opened in 2018. And part of our mission, it was multi-pronged, some goals we had within the small business world of how to run a business and that sort of thing. But as far as the food was concerned, we wanted to source local ingredients of the highest quality and do everything seasonal. Uh, on top of all that, all our food is powered by fermentation. So we use microbes of all sorts, from single cell bacteria to actual molds in our food production. And that's kind of the bedrock of what we do. So we've been open going on 8 years now. It's been quite a fun ride. We've gotten attention for various different things that we do in the food world, which is always fun because to us, we're just cooking things that we like to eat and feed people. So, it's nice when those things come along for the ride. But yeah, we involve ourselves in a lot of issues with local agriculture, workers' rights. And we try to use our small business platform as a way to show people that small business can pay people competitive wages and benefits and take care of them just as the big corporations do. We just do it differently. So yeah, that's the kind of the, I guess, the top down view of what Larder is.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool to hear. I didn't realize that it had so much of a community outreach element to it. But that is certainly the now. Can you walk us back a little bit? Like, how did you come to find hospitality?
Yeah, I arguably was more or less born into it. My grandmother was a kosher caterer out of my family synagogue up here in Cleveland on the east side. And I was a bad kid. She was one of the only people I'd listen to. That's like what we deduced it down to. And so I got stuck in the kitchen with her. And every weekend, occasionally during the week, there'd be something on like a Wednesday night or that sort of thing. And that's kind of where it all started. Literally doing dishes, making tuna salad, rolling blintzes, for luncheons and that sort of thing. And from there, that just felt to me okay, this is what it is. I had no notion of what a chef was because I didn't really work in kitchens that actually had chefs. I was in kitchens that had catering managers or kitchen managers or that sort of thing until later on in my career. So, but it kind of all started there as a young kid. And
Yeah,
coincidentally, that's when my using was, started too. I was drunk for the first time. Wasn't even, 12, 13, that off to the races.
as you're growing a career, one of the crazy things that I seem to find a lot, especially with some of the chefs that I talk to on the show, is the ability to kind of like tear into oneself with
Yeah.
using while still being able to grow their career. Like it doesn't seem to fade the passion enough to keep building a career
Yeah.
until it kind of hits a stopping point.
Yeah. Listen, we all kind of have different bottoms and comings too, and that sort of thing. So, for me, I got sober at 19. I was told I had to go get sober or go to jail. Ended up going through a detox and then roughly a 90-day stay at definitely not a rehab center most people look to seek out. More of a rehab center, subsidized by the county and locally and that sort of thing. So definitely no such thing as private rooms or, even watching television. I don't even know. I think we had a TV. Maybe, I don't know. At this point, God. So I'm 43 now, so give you an idea, or I'll be 43 at the end of March. So give you an idea how long I've been sober. And I got sober Literally, wasn't 19 a month. My sobriety date is the 20th of April in 2002. So, yeah, I was kinda forced into it, and at that time too, I was at that point, I was working in kitchens, I was working for, like, a local diner, and I was cooking, I was head of the garde manger station, I ran the pantry station. I thought that was, like, the greatest thing because I was no longer, like, having to wash dishes and just do basic prep. I was actually putting food on a plate that people were about to eat. I actually left kitchens, and I actually left kitchens. I still picked up various catering jobs and still was cooking, and I wanted to go to culinary school, mulling that about, but I actually worked as a mortician for like 3.5 years right before I went to
Oh, wow.
culinary school. So, my cooking, for that kind of 3, 4 year period, was more interpersonal and personal than it was professional because, I couldn't be in kitchens. All my using buddy, everybody I knew, like, that was where everybody I knew. And then everybody else I knew, I was, as a teen, I was very fortunate to be in a band that got this minor record deal. And so I either knew party chefs or party musicians.
Yeah.
Hence becoming my uncle, my grandmother, she was the caterer. My uncle, her son, is the funeral director and the mortician. So, I had to take the measure of leaving it professionally because that just was not an environment, I could be around that I could handle.
Yeah, what did it take to come back?
Well, I couldn't, like, all I wanted to do was cook. Like, I didn't want to do anything else. All I wanted to do was cook. And, like, I started getting to this point, so I started with my grandmother, and then by the time I was 14, 15, I was so into cooking. Okay, so I got into cooking insects. I read about it in an encyclopedia, how people eat them for food, and it's a serious thing, and it wasn't gross, and I was like, "Well, if we eating, like, dead birds and, like, dead sure, why not? Like, what's gross at that point, right? Like, heads, feet, guts, entrails, like, they all have it, you know? And arguably, like, there are people inherently afraid of chickens. So, like, on some level, they're like a creepy crawly to people, you know? So 14, 15 years old, I'm like cooking insects. I actually got my sister feeder mice as a pet so that I could sell the pinkies back to the pet store and they would trade them for like crickets and mealworms and all sorts of
Oh,
stuff. So
wow.
so, like the push to, yeah, I kind of realized even going into being a mortician that this was not something I wanted to pursue. It always cooking. And it got to the point where I was like picking up more and more like just kind of mercenary cooking jobs here and there. Wasn't really like working in a restaurant, a full service place or anything, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to culinary school. And so that's kind of like what I did. So I took my time, I got sober, I had a good foundation, where I felt I could be in a high stress environment where there's these other people doing these things and I had the tools to be like, no, I'm okay, knowing there's an open bottle of wine on that station or that sort of thing, like as long as it isn't me doing it, I'm okay. So I went to culinary school.
What do you think that took for you as a 19-year-old to I mean, I feel like that's a lot to kinda, like, put on your shoulders. It's a pretty huge growth pattern for that age, and I guess for me, it's tough to imagine because 19 is kind of like where my problem started, and
When I went to rehab, I detoxed because I was using heroin.
wow.
So just, whereas you started at 19, I was started 11 going on 12,
Yeah,
but by the time I was 13, 14, I like had a pack of cigarettes on me all the time. It doesn't matter what the substance is, from
yeah,
ethanol, alcohol to anything else. That's just how my body processes anything that's potentially addictive. It
yeah.
doesn't matter, you know?
So the detox is one thing, but, how are you talking to yourself, or what was a support system looking like in those years that it took to experience that growth before you started culinary school?
Yeah, yeah, really interesting. It was because during that time period, I came back to music too and being comfortable in like the settings where you play music professionally and everything because those are just rife with drugs and alcohol too. But I was playing in a band with a bunch of sober people. In fact, some of the individuals, like using friends of mine that we got sober within a year, 18 months of each other. And actually, there's a handful of us that's my little buddy group. We're all still sober. We're all going on 20 years, over 20 years. A couple people have joined the group who have about like 17 years. Um, we it's this group of like 5, 6, yeah, we all used to kind of party and do these things together, and then we got sober together, you know? What are the odds of that too?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was early on, like a bedrock foundation. I was very heavily into AA early on in my sobriety. I was going to multiple, 5 meetings a week. I had a home group. I had a sponsor. After I went through the steps the first time, plus 6 months, I started sponsoring people. I was very, very engaged. I was always putting my sobriety before anything else that I was doing. And that is, what really, really helped me. I think early sobriety, just get a good bedrock, you know?
Yeah.
And two, like for me at 19, this is the first time I'm thinking clearly in my life, answering those questions. A lot of kids at 13 or 14 are like, hey, what am I going to do with my life? And I'm just thinking about getting laid and partying. Like, that's all. I just want to do cool shit. I want to go places and listen to music and be outside and be wasted. And those were my goals, man. I obtained them all. I just had fun and didn't give a fuck about anything, so I started asking those questions later. So, at a later stage of development, you start to ask those things of yourself, and you're kind of have a little bit more of an idea of what types of questions you're asked.
What did fun look like after?
Fun looked like after it took a while for fun to happen. Easily a solid year, I want to say. Before, like, I felt I was having fun because, like, early sobriety, it's like chasing these things that, like, yeah, some people have fun with and trying new things out socially that don't involve drugs and alcohol, because so much of your fun is centered on that. Whether
Mhm.
you're just using and playing video games or you're going out and like it doesn't matter, it's that's the cornerstone of the fun. So trying to be like, oh yeah, watching a movie not wasted is could be fun, or going out to a cafe where there's people playing chess, like sure that's fun. I'm not knocking chess. I actually was a state chess champion. So I love chess. It takes a lot more investigation into like, well, what do I actually like? What do I actually think is fun, right? If all the fun you have is centered around like being wasted and you're using, then it's like you'll never really know if crocheting is fun or like, a book club or just anything that isn't on your radar that people do for enjoyment.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I'd say it solidly took me a year before, because I was trying different things. I'd meet up with people, and most of my fun was more about just being in safe, sober spaces early on. So it was like, yeah, I'm having a good time with my buddies, and we're hanging out for 2 hours at the coffee shop, and that's it. That's the fun. But, and rightly so, you really have to learn, no matter what age you are, your whole definition of what fun is and what's engaging and what you want to be doing. Like, you have to ask those personal questions and find it out. Like, it takes time, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a
Because
little
you're
bit
looking,
about
you're looking for fun that isn't destructive too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it.
It doesn't necessarily have to be fun that's like positive, like a hobby or something where you end up with something afterwards, like crocheting, right? Where you got this blanket and you're like, oh, that was fun. I made a blanket and now I have a blanket. Like it doesn't even have to be that type of thing. But you've got to like just redefine what you find enjoyment in, or even find what you actually find enjoyment in.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I was going to bring up. Like taking a couple steps back of like really asking like, who the hell am I? What is this person like and not
Yeah.
like really? Because so much of it is one track.
And you may not like fishing if you're not wasted. There's always
Yeah.
that possibility that like sober you, hyper aware you, interpersonal you, struggling you, however we want to frame sobriety, just isn't, your brain's just not clicking with some of the things you used to do,
Yeah. Sober me gave up my golf clubs.
you know? You're like, this kind of fucking sucks. And like, I'm not walking around pounding beers and smoking blunts. See, I get it. That's, I think, definitely, people in early sobriety, that's a huge thing that you kind of have to go through. You have to figure it out,
Yeah. I mean, I remember sitting with myself asking, like, what do I even do? Like, do I go bowling? Like, it really came back to that.
and if you have ever seen The Big Lebowski, I don't know if you're newly sober, if you should be going bowling.
Yeah. Right. Depending on where you go.
So it's all these questions. It's all these things you have to kind of figure out. I don't know. Who knows? You may get sober and jogging could be your thing. Where before you were like, a fat drunk slob. You just never know. You just never know. So
Yeah. That's what happened to me. I became a runner.
right on. I did not.
We
But I
we
do
don't all have to.
hike in the forest with like 30 pounds of mushrooms on my back.
Yeah. That's rad as well.
Different strokes for different folks.
How did sobriety follow you into the kitchen? And that were you vocal about it? Did it change the way that you lead in the kitchen, the way that you like build a team, especially with everything that you described about Larder? Like, it sounds like a lot of that couldn't happen if you weren't somebody who wanted to craft a place with intention.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really, really glad you asked that sort of thing because at different stages in sobriety, it's been different things and different draws in for me also. Um, Early on, going to culinary school, I'm living in the Hudson Valley, just a click, north of New York City. And the first thing I do whenever I'm introducing myself to someone is, "Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm sober." Straight up, like I am in a place where there's a wine curriculum, like I had when I went to the school too, part of going to the school was, "Hey, I'm sober. Can I get alternative credits for the wine program and study something else, say independent study, whatever, equal credits where I don't have to do that." So originally too with me, the school said yes. And then when time for it came, they said no.
Mm.
And then the state's Human Rights Commission came in because it's an ADA, Americans with Disabilities, Alcoholism and Education, that sort of thing, directly for this issue is covered. Ended up being a huge legal battle. And
Wow.
we can talk about that, a story for another time, which, eventually got to the point where I could not afford to fight their appeals on these things. But, like I said, I'm sober. I'm looking for options and these sorts of things. Like, I'm going to be in environments where these are important because I'm going to be a chef in restaurants and food and drink and it all works. So just being upfront about that, like, which destroys the concept of anonymity for those of you following along. But for me, it's what I needed. Being clearly communicated with that in instances where I might be expected to either work with or taste alcohol and being like, no, I'm not going to partake in a tasting. Depending on how I feel personally, maybe I can smell them and talk about pairing with you, and flavors, but maybe that might not work on a given day. Especially in early sobriety. So having those communications with my professors in culinary school, I was working in kitchens, like the chefs I was working on. And yeah, if there's a red wine sauce or like someone else in the kitchen can taste it. Sure, I'll make it, but please taste for me. And, this way I keep detailed notes of what I'm doing and how much I add in and all that. And I know how to work with it without having to specifically taste that. Identification of like my heaviest triggers, red wine and brown spirits, till this day. Like if I smell like a barbecue sauce with Jack Daniels in it, or the beef bourguignon, just all that red wine in there. I get this like, oh, that'd be nice to drink. It just induces something in me. Where I think about it now, it's more fleeting than ever. I don't focus on that and it's not an obsession as it is when the disease is raging, but it still happens. But I'm like hyper aware of those things, and understanding that and portraying that to a work environment. So now I took it even a step further because, I was having this idea like alcohol, or I should say vinegar is alcohol that's been fermented. So there's no alcohol in vinegar and vinegar is made from alcohol. So if I learned how to make vinegar, I could take any and all these alcohols and turn them into vinegar And I could understand all these conversations happening around me with pairing and taste and flavor and how these different things interweave and work in food and cuisine. So I literally became a vinegar maker. Like that is what I did. Going through that process for me as a culinarian, coming out of that, I became more comfortable working with alcohol in a professional medium that didn't involve me actually imbibing with it. To
Yeah.
the point, like, I started, like, hanging out with brewers, understanding their processes and what they were doing, just to think about, like, what vinegars I could get from their products. But still, fundamentally, as I said, that vinegar is fermented alcohol, so it's alcohol fermented. And so just to understand that overarching process, like me, my eye was always on the vinegar, but I had to understand how we got to alcohol in the middle. Being able to kinda do those things is what really, here I'm still doing them, and they're still working. I'm still sober.
Yeah.
So, I think, those are probably some of the biggest things early on. Setting boundaries, having open conversations, those are 2 of the biggest. And, if someone is going through a 12-step program and they're holding on to anonymity and that sort of thing, like, well, that's just really for you when you're in the room. You wanna, like, wear a T-shirt that says, "I go to 12-step meetings," like, that's on you, you know?
What conversations do you have, with staff? Is it like, do you have shift drinks, or did it change the way that you kind of like own and operate?
Yeah, I mean, at Larder, so Larder opened, we didn't have a liquor license. In fact, Larder has only had a liquor license. October was a year that we've had a liquor license, so like 18 months now. So we've been open almost 8 years, 6.5 years. We haven't even sold a drop of alcohol. So the whole, the shift drinks, that sort of thing, like it wasn't even part of the culture here.
Gotcha.
But we've always had a craft soda program from day one. Like we have a single line seltzer head that we, carbonate and feed in. And we make all these crazy syrups and chocolate phosphates, and celery sodas and different things. So, I guess maybe some people were having a shift drink throughout the shift, pounding chocolate egg creams, that sort of thing. But we literally opened a place that culture didn't even establish. So, now that we have a liquor license and we have a beverage program and you can get a cocktail or a mocktail on our menu, that sort of thing. One of our chefs is our beverage director and he handles those things and he's trained in all the fermentation techniques that like I bring to our food and everything. So he can literally confidently craft or he can ask me for an ingredient and we can work together from that standpoint and, whatnot. But so creating a team around you that has the palate you're looking for and, doesn't have problems with the substances like you do. That's another just a huge, huge benefit.
Yeah. Do you think that changes the back of house culture?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, here's the reality of it. There's hot things and sharp things and acidic things and salty things, like all these things that can hurt you at any given time. Our goal is to feed people the most delicious and highest quality things that we can all the time. And so anything that throws off your physical ability to execute something and also your judgment of deciding what deliciousness is doesn't necessarily have a place in the workflow. As far as work goes, the kitchen is completely separate from anything the guest experiences. They are coming in to wine and dine and do all those things. You are there to make sure they can do them. So, like, this idea of a shift drink, the concept of it, like, I mean, it can shift, it can change. It doesn't have to exist. It can exist in like a shift meal, a shift food, there's many, many different ways that can, be explored. I mean, come on, like, why did the restaurant industry still hold on to the shift drink when like the lawyers in their midday lunch drinking, like think Mad Men, that's not acceptable anymore. Why did we hold on to why did we say like everybody is doing it, everybody's going out for a drink after work and that sort of thing? Why did it become ingrained in us that it has to be the responsibility of the restaurant and it has to happen here and all these different things? When all these other industries are like, no, we're not gonna keep a flask in our desk anymore. Even just the display of scotch behind you. We're not going to pour a drink for a meeting. Like other industries don't do this. So the idea of a shift drink is like, yeah, I get it. It's here, but we take these things to make money on and sell. Like that's what we're doing over there.
Yeah, it's wild to see the ways that shift drinks are, used. Sometimes you see it as a reward for a crazy or a slow night, or you see it as like an actual form of payment. Or,
Yeah.
sorry, I know that your wages are so low, but at least you get alcohol at the end of your shift.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but if I had low wages, I don't know. I'd rather take like a meal home that I didn't have to spend grocery money on or like, like that's my take. I'd rather send someone home with a sandwich, a side, a cookie, like instead of the shift drinks. I think it's just individual chefs, kind of shifting that around,
In what ways do you give your support now? I mean, one way is this by sharing your story for folks to hear it, but is
Yeah.
it you find a giving back?
Oh, yeah, 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 100%. And in fact, part of the reason that Larder didn't have a liquor license its, first year so open was I was like, well, let's show we can have a great restaurant that doesn't have an alcohol program. Like, let's just tick that off, and then like when we have to grow as a business and have conversations about diversification and revenue streams and all those, yeah, okay, we can bring the liquor license in. Then it becomes like a different headspace thing for me as a business owner. Yeah, I think just I do a lot personally for myself in sobriety. Right? This is just that selfishness aspect of it, working your own program. So like I continually hold myself accountable. I do things like I said, interact with sober people. I have a core group that we're texting everything to each other throughout the day from inappropriate memes to, hey, I'm giving a lead if anybody wants to show up, that sort of thing. I have a personal stance that I don't necessarily go to 12-step meetings as I used to, and it isn't necessarily a part of my sobriety in the way that it once was. It plays more of a minor role than in other times where it's played a major role, just for me as an individual. But if I am asked to lead, I do not say no. As long as I can get a babysitter, as long as there's no in here like, oh, I'm not going to a meeting. Like if I'm asked to do those things, those service aspects and share about my story, like I always say yes as long as I can. So that's, another personal thing that I do. Me as working with alcohol, now I'm really into like, I have something called a rotary evaporator. Science labs use these for distillation techniques. So now we know I can take a bottle of wine and run it through this like machine and chiller and cooler and vacuum all this stuff that I have. I can actually distill the alcohol out of something. So I can take the alcohol, I can run it through this vacuum machine and a bottle of wine, a thing of gin or whatever. And I can literally remove the alcohol and everything I'm left with is everything else that was there. So I'm really fascinated by those things happening in the non-alcoholic world right now. So, like, as an individual working with it, I'm like, now I can totally take it out and remove it. It isn't always good when we do that. From a taste and flavor standpoint, some compounds are actually alcohol soluble compared to water solubility and different things like that in a solution that we have to take into account. But so I have this whole new realm of, I was just able to get my rotary evaporator a couple of years ago. Prior to that, it was cost prohibitive for a small business owner like me versus like a huge funded lab to be able to have a piece of equipment like that and stuff. So there are continually new things like I'm finding in food, working with alcohol to like get the alcohol out and do other things. So I think ABC, all of these things I've just kind of brought up, the combination of. So the willingness to engage in sobriety, the making sure that I do it, or making sure I don't say no to sober-minded activities, and then finding things creatively for me as a chef and entrepreneur to be able to pursue where I can work around it, work without it, and these different things that maybe don't even exist in some contexts.
Yeah.
As a culinarian, to essentially be on the beginning stages of those technologies really hitting. It's a fun place to be.
What advice do you have for somebody looking to kickstart a non-alcoholic program? I'm really eager to hear from you because, you've got a wealth of creativity. I also think about the fact that you got sober before like the giant cocktail boom, but you've still been in restaurants enough to see that like on the rise. I love your story of, locality and preservation, but if somebody is just kind of like looking at some of those, alcohol fake bottles and they have no idea like where to start, like what advice do you have for somebody to put together not just a program, but a program of note?
Yeah, so I want people to maybe listen to keep in mind, like, we have problems with alcohol. That's why we're talking about this. But we only make up a small fraction of the people that actually don't consume alcohol for various reasons. There's people with diseases and disorders that they can't have alcohol or drugs. There's people on medications that interfere, with those drugs and could kill someone or, all sorts of different things. There's people that come from cultural and religious, standpoints where they don't consume and that sort of thing. So I want people to understand, like, the majority of people, out there, these things that we're talking about applying to maybe ourselves as sober people or in recovery maybe don't apply to the other groups of people that don't use alcohol and are seeking out these types of alternative beverages. So that's one thing that has to be boiled down, because for me, as excited as I am about being able to remove alcohol from spirits and wines and beers and be able to chase in, I can't do that type of drinking. Like, if I'm going to drink beer, I want to fucking get wasted while I do it. Like, and any beer, like, it has no necessarily, like, I feel that's a very dangerous slope for people who are in recovery to kind of like replace that. So I like to preface that out. Me as an individual, I do not seek out any spirits. All right. I more examine them for that other group of people that can't, don't want, can't, that sort of thing. In my investigations culinarily with them and exploring them and even creating products to sell and for market from that standpoint. So, I want to be very clear on that. It can be very difficult. Like, you grab an NA bottle of gin or NA beer, like, part of being sober is destroying the habits around your using. I like to really put that out there for those of people like us listening, right? I think, the best place I think for anybody to start with soda. All right. I want everybody to understand. Yes, we have different flavors of soda and that sort of thing, but like, as drinks, they're vapid. They fucking suck. We've decided through industrialization and canning, like, we've removed texture and body from them. We've removed whole ingredients from them. Like, when you come into Larder and get a celery soda, which to give you a frame of reference, Coca-Cola premieres nationwide in 1891. It's distributed nationwide. Prior to Coca-Cola doing that, celery was the number one soda flavor in America. All right. Soda was mainly medicinal at that point. It wasn't this enjoyment drink. If we've ever heard like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right? The syrups we now use in sodas started as these medicinal syrups. They were made from, Coca-Cola has like bitter orange and cola nut and all these things that have medicinal properties. And they were put into a concentrated tincture and sweetened. And you would go to a pharmacist, and to activate them and give them to you in a way that wouldn't make you gag or even want to vomit when you put this like bitter, horrible tasting stuff in your mouth, you either ate it with a spoonful of sugar. That's what we did with kids. But adults, what they would do is maybe mix it, dilute it out into a little alcohol, or they would put it in a charger. They would pump some gas in it, add a little phosphoric acid, phosphates, right? Phosphoric acid was believed to help adjust the taste and dial back the bitterness and all these different things. And you would drink the medicine. Eventually, we started adding more and more sugar, and people experimented with more and more botanicals and flavors, and it, became what we now know. So we no longer have like hunks of things floating in them and different things to change up the texture and everything. So I say start with soda. We have celery soda here. We don't strain the syrup. We don't filter it. We use fresh celery, fresh dill, pickling spice in there. It's got sugar and vinegar and our Koji stuff, but like you drink it, there's little bits of stuff that come up in the straw. As it sits over time in a clear glass, it starts to settle, and then you stir it and you see everything move around. Like it is living, it is breathing, it has texture, it has all these wonderful attributes to it that are just beyond the bubbles, beyond just the direct stimulation of that. So get into soda, get into like making drinks that are like holistically fun and not like this vapid aluminum can. You know, you can can your soda. I got nothing against canning and having canned soda, that sort of thing. But like, don't get away from these like translucent clear liquids of just different colors. Like, have some fun, explore texture, explore your fruit and vegetable scraps in new ways. Like that, I think, is probably the funnest and best place for anyone to start. Because here's the fun thing too. If you do any of those sodas, those syrups you're making can go into a cocktail program inherently. So if you're making them and designing them as a soda base to be mixed with seltzer water or charged themselves, it's very easy then later to add on and do the alcohol work, because you already have something that exists on this base level where you can only go up from in terms of its usability and its broad application. I mean, hell, some of our syrups we make for the beverage program too, like we use as like glazes on meat and like things like that. And instead of, when we're doing fruity ones, sometimes we'll use those syrups instead of like maple syrup or, in that type of application on pancakes. Like, so they have a lot of application. You dial those in and then you can just grow from there. I think that's a great, great way to start because then you're not messing around with the vocabulary of like, oh, we have a mocktail program. You have a soda program. Like people get that. People get pop and soda, right? You start putting mocktail or like, non-alcoholic cocktail, like that verbiage on there alone. It's that next level of refinement and quality you're trying to portray. Start simple, start straightforward. Like, listen, if people know that there's like whole fruits and vegetables in your handmade, they see you mixing it at the bar, like, yeah, they're still going to pay $3 to $5 a glass, depending on the market you're in for a soda. Think of some bottled beverages. I serve a 20-ounce soda. We charge $3.50 for it. I've got some like 12-ounce things that, we charge $3.50 for. Pop infused water and that sort of thing. You can run a good program that kind of can be somewhat competitive with even your alcohol program. Maybe not push all the way, but it's a really, really fun way to start. And it gives you things that you can use throughout your menu in different ways.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's
I hope
really
that
cool to
was
hear
maybe
you.
that was maybe the long answer around, the long way around just to say make your own sodas. But and your sodas,
No,
we opted here too. We don't make fermented sodas. I'm known for fermentation and working within that sort of thing. Fermented sodas can become alcoholic, and then then we got to convert them into all this different things. We have carbonated water that we mix syrups with, and whether you're opening a bottle of carbonated water or you have it on tap, it's very easy to start doing.
yeah, it's super cool. And it was really awesome to hear that as well. I mean, when I was in, I had a chocolate phosphate, and it was one of those things. Like I took a sip, and my eyes widened, and friend who I was with, I was like, "You got to take a sip of this right now." So to hear of
Well,
like the passion that went into that,
and here's that, like, with that, like, it's just chocolate syrup, but we spec the cocoa. We get, like, an extra dark roasted cocoa with extra high fat content in it, and we make the syrup. It's our syrup recipe that, we cook that cocoa powder into, and then we mix it, and you look at it compared to Hershey's, and, like, our chocolate syrup is almost jet black. It's not a shade of brown. It's like nearly black. There's all these different things that go into it. And like I said, the roast, we do a bean spec, like we've calculated all that into the chocolate, and that speaks for itself. You paid $3.50 or whatever for that glass. I'm most people probably wouldn't much bat an eye if it was $4 or even $4.25 for that drink.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it was good. It was worth it.
well, thank you. Thank you.
Jeremy, my final question: what do you
Yeah.
love about yourself?
This is so much fun. So, when I was in rehab, I had this great counselor. Rick Shilbagen. Rick isn't with us anymore. He was like Hell's Angels in the 70s, heroin dealer, moving coke in the 80s. He was a Lakota Indian too. Pure, very incredible guy. He was my individual counselor in rehab, and part of his therapies were creating self-love. Rick understood that someone getting sober just doesn't even know about loving themselves or even want to think about loving themselves and all these things. So Rick wanted us every morning when we were getting ready, brushing our teeth, he wanted you to stare in the mirror directly into your own eyes and say, I love myself 3 times. And I'll tell you what, after a few months of doing that, you start to learn to, and little things about yourself, everything from how you look to how your voice sounds to how you function in the world to your individual personality, just like you love being you. Like that is what you need to love about yourself, right? And that transfers to so many different things. You talk about people with like body dysmorphia and, self-esteem issues and just, with parallel things to drug and alcohol use and the things that go through our minds, but then things that aren't necessary. Normal people, if they have body issues, they don't like to put that issue up their nose or drink it down. They go to the gym, they try to fix them, they get therapy. We we have another solution for these sorts of things. Uh, just kind of looking at all that grossly. Just being able to take it in, understand that it all starts with just loving yourself, and it can be all these little idiosyncrasies about you. Like I have ADHD and Tourette's, and I've been since a kid and all that stuff. And that was a huge part of my drug use. I had my own bottle of Ritalin at 12. I would crush the pills and snort them. They're like, just take a pill when you feel you need it. And I'm like, okay. But just anything now in my adult life, like I've like fully through therapy learned to love my ADHD mind and like understand it's making me who I am and makes me my individualistic self. And like, I don't have to, like, if you have a problem with like my distractedness and all these different things, I go, that's your issue. I am functioning fine in the world, mind you. I don't need medication to keep me under control and all these different things. Like I've had that realization. See, just all these different things about yourself as an individual, like pick something about yourself and learn to love it. That is where it is. It's just like that whole packet. And if early sobriety, literally, you almost can't even look yourself in the eyes sometimes in early sobriety, especially after a couple of those steps you go through and you start making amends. So being able to look yourself in the eyes and just say, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself until you actually feel it in some sort of way, That's it. You're not picking a specific thing about you or anything. It's just, I love being me. That is Jeffersonian, inalienable rights to humanity, like loving being yourself. And that is what, it doesn't have to be the specific thing. I think that's what people have issue with. They try to find something about themselves that they do like or love. And it's like, no, you as a complete person, like when you make amends, you do a complete inventory. You inventory good things you've done and bad things you've done and identify, maybe the good has made the amend for you already. And you have to complete inventory. So it is not about picking the individual thing. It's just literally finding anything, being comfortable with saying, yes, I love myself and I enjoy being who I am. That's
I
it.
think that's great.
So
Jeremy, thanks so much for the time today.
yeah, Josh, my pleasure. Thanks for letting me go on.